What's up guys, it's Ryan McCulloch of NextGenerationMusicSessions.com. In today's video, we're going to go over the Dorian Scale. So I'd like to hear from you. When you think of chord progressions that are modal chord progressions, how do you think of creating them? Let me know in the comments section below. The Dorian scale is one of the most frequently used minor scales that we have in music. So it probably behooves you to know what it is. So there are a couple ways of talking about the Dorian scale. So one is what's called the relative method, where you take the key that you're playing in, so say C major for example, you take C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and you start on the note D. It gives you a D Dorian scale. So another way of talking about the Dorian scale is what's called the parallel method, where you start on D, construct a D minor scale, so that's D, E, F, G, A, B flat, and C, and you're going to raise the sixth note, the B flat, up to a B. Here's the thing, most of you probably already know what a D Dorian scale is, or a Dorian scale is. The thing that gets lost in the mix is how you take the notes and make a Dorian sound out of them. And that's what I'm going to show you in today's video, is how to take the scales and make songs, chord progressions that use Dorian structures, more or less. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. I'm gonna need a guitar. All right, so here we are. So I've recorded a little chord progression using a looper pedal. The chord progression is this. Very simple. It's just C to F, the one chord and the four chord in C major. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little melody or melodic improvisation using the notes from the D Dorian scale, which, as we pointed out, are exactly the same as the notes from the C major scale, right? So here we go. 3, 4. So you might have noticed that that sounds about as minor and Dorian as MacGyvering your way into a box filled with piranhas. It sounds about as Dorian as putting a roll of Mentos in a Coca-Cola bottle. That's about as Dorian as liver spots on a bass. Notice that's about as Dorian as overcooked meatloaf on Thanksgiving Day. That's about as Dorian as you might have noticed, that's about as Dorian as a kangaroo jacked up on jackrabbits. I think you get the point, right? It doesn't sound Dorian at all. It's a major scale. Why? Because the notes, the chord progression that you're using is a C major chord progression. Okay, so we're gonna do a different experiment where I take the chords from a D Dorian scale, that is a D minor chord and a G major chord, and I'm gonna play a D Dorian melody over it. And it sounds like this. You get the point, don't you? The point is that the context is what matters in this case. It's not the notes that you're using to construct the melody, it's the notes that make up the chord progressions that you're constructing melodies over, right? In other words, the chord progression is what guides the sound of the mode, right? So the next question is, how do you know which chords to use for a Dorian progression, or for any progression for that matter? Well, the way that I think about it, and I'm not sure that this is the only way to think about it, but the way I think about it is you take your regular minor or major scale and you figure out which notes are different. So for the Dorian scale, the different note is that scale degree 6. So if the scale degree 6, in this case B for the D Dorian, if that's the different note, which chords do you use? Well, I would strongly encourage you to use a D minor chord because it is a D scale, after all, a D minor scale. But then you're going to contrast it with a chord that has that B natural in it. So a really common chord progression, Dorian chord progression, is going to be the 1 minor chord, in this case D, to the 4 major chord, in this case G. You hear groups like Pink Floyd using this type of progression quite frequently. Okay, so what are your other options then? You've got D minor and you've got G major. The other primary option is going to be your 1 minor chord to a 2 minor chord. So that in this case is going to be D minor to E minor. And this type of chord progression was featured very prominently in Miles Davis's So What. So what you do is you think about that different note, in this case B, and you ask yourself, what is the chord that it could be if B were the root, the third, the fifth, or the seventh of some chord, and you get chord progressions that sound like Dorian progressions. All right, that's all for the guide to D Dorian, but stay tuned because I'm going to show you how to play a D Dorian scale all over the neck, coming up shortly.